Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into this week edition of my top starts and sits for week 12 of this NFL season. Before I dive into today's video, as a quick reminder, not only you can apply my top starts and sits to your seasonal leagues, I apply them personally to my daily lineups that I set on the weekends, as well as when I do bet on players' overs and unders. So you can consider these names as well. So let's go ahead and dive into the quarterback position as I always started off with. My top start of the week, I'm going to go with Jared Goff against the Giants. This is a home game for Detroit. I'm thinking after that disappointing performance by their offense against Philadelphia, their offense as a unit is going to come out angry and put up a lot of points against a very bad New York defense. When you look at the matchup on paper, they allow the second most points per game against the quarterback position this season. Two quarterbacks in their last four games finished with at least 220 yards. But why I really like it is they've been giving up passing touchdowns. They've given up 10 passing touchdowns in their last four games. So I like the thought that Jared Goff should at least reach 220 passing yards and get you anywhere between 2 to 3 touchdowns on Sunday. My other start, he was my waiver wire ad of the week, and I like him as a streamable option if you're looking for somebody at the quarterback spot this week. Bryce Young against the 49ers, coming off his best performance in his career. It's the best performance from a Panther quarterback in their franchise history. And I'm looking for him to carry that over into this Monday night matchup against the 49ers. San Francisco has allowed the ninth most points per game against the quarterback position this season. When you look at the 49ers' last four games, three different quarterbacks finished with at least 280 passing yards, and they've also given up 10 passing touchdowns in their last four games. Now, I don't know if they're going to he'll reach the 280 mark, so I am looking for Bryce Young to get anywhere between 220 to 250 yards passing, and ideally at least a pair of touchdowns in that game. Moving into my sits, my top sit of the week, I am going to go with Baker Mayfield against the Rams. The Rams have allowed the sixth fewest points per game against the quarterback position this season. When you look at what they have allowed in their last four games, they have allowed passing yards. So that could be a benefit if you do want to roll the dice on Mayfield. Three different quarterbacks have finished with at least 275 passing yards against the Rams in their last four games. But I do think he has a lower floor this week because they've only given up 5 passing touchdowns in those games. So if he doesn't get those 2 passing touchdowns, you're going to be betting on that he's going to get you close to 300 passing yards this weekend. My other sit, I know he's coming off a good first game back in the lineup, but I would suggest maybe looking at a different option than Brock Purdy this week. He is facing a Panthers defense who have allowed the ninth fewest points per game against the quarterback position this season. When you look at the last four games from Carolina, only two quarterbacks that they faced finished over 200 passing yards, and they only have given up 3 passing touchdowns in the last four games. Now, I do think Purdy should be able to cross the 200 passing yard mark, but they've been very good at keeping opponents as of late out of the end zone as far as passing the ball. So if he doesn't get you those touchdowns, it could be a floor performance from Purdy on that Monday night game. Moving into my top starts and sits at the running back spot. My top start of the week, I'm going to go with the rookie running back that's on fire right now for New England, TreVeyon Henderson against the Bengals. Now, we'll have to see if Ramondre Stevenson if he's back or not. He did practice today, but it was a limited practice. If Stevenson does play, do keep in mind he will cut into some of Henderson touches. And if you are a Stevenson manager, as long as he registers a full practice by Friday, I would definitely roll the dice on him because of this great matchup. With that being said, against the Bengals defense, who have allowed the most points per game against running backs this season, when you look at the last four games from Cincinnati, 5 different running backs have finished with at least 105 total yards against them. And they have given up 6 running back touchdowns in their last 4 games. Now, one of those was a Breece Hall passing touchdown. So technically, it's kind of 5 running back touchdowns, but that's still over 1 running back touchdown a game. So I definitely would continue having Henderson in my lineups this week. My other start, don't have to tell you to play Jahmyr Gibbs at this point. Plus, he doesn't qualify to make my list. But with that being said, I like his counterpart, David Montgomery, against the Giants. The Giants have allowed the 3rd most points per game against the running back position this season. When you look at the last 4 games from the New York defense, 4 different running backs have finished with at least 80 rushing yards in those games. And then what I really like is they've also given up 7 running back touchdowns in those games. So I'm looking for Montgomery to get close to 80 rushing yards and at least 1 touchdown in this matchup. Moving into my sits, I am going to suggest sitting Chase Brown against the Patriots. He's got a very tough matchup on paper. He's going against a Patriots defense that have allowed the fewest points per game against running backs this season. When you look at the last 4 games from the New England Patriots defense, not one running back finished over 60 rushing yards against them. And then in those 4 games, they did not allow one single running back touchdown in those 4 games. And not only in those 4 games, they didn't give up a touchdown. When you look at the entire season, the Patriots defense have only allowed 3 running back touchdowns at this point. Moving into my other top sits, I'm going to suggest sitting Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears against the Seahawks. Seahawks coming off that loss to Los Angeles this past weekend. I think they're another team that's going to play angry this weekend. So before I even dive into the stats, I think at some point the Seahawks are going to go up 14 plus points. So I think the game script's just not going to go the running back way for both of the Titans running backs, where they're going to have to be a pass heavy offense to come back in this matchup. But then when you look at this matchup on paper, the Seahawks defense have allowed the 8th fewest points per game against the running back position. When you look at their last 4 games, only one running back crossed over 70 rushing yards against Seattle, and in those 4 games they only gave up 3 running back touchdowns. So the fact that they're not giving up a lot of production to the running back position, and you're talking about a split backfield in Tennessee that could have a game script not go their way, I would turn to other options than Pollard and Spears this weekend. Moving into my top starts and sits at the wide receiver position. My top start of the week, I don't really care if it's Aaron Rodgers or if it's Mason Rudolph, because I think he's going to get a ton of targets regardless who's throwing him the ball. But I still like DK Metcalf against the Bears this weekend. Going against a Chicago defense that have allowed the 3rd most points per game against the wide receiver position. When you look at the last 4 games, they've allowed 3 different wide receivers to finish with at least 85 receiving yards, and they've also given up 4 wide receiver touchdowns. So I'm looking for a ceiling performance from Metcalf where he'll get you at least 90 receiving yards and a touchdown against Chicago. Sticking in that matchup, I like the other wide receivers on the Bears side, Rome Odunze and DJ Moore against the Steelers. Steelers have allowed the 5th most points per game against wide receivers this season. When you look at their last 4 games, they've actually have allowed 4 different wide receivers to finish with at least 85 receiving yards, and they have also given up 4 wide receiver touchdowns in those games. So I'm looking for a big outing out of the pair of wide receivers in Chicago. Moving into my top sits, I'm going to go with Michael Pittman Jr., the group of them, because you never know who to play, which is why I kind of really don't like them as well, besides the tough matchup on paper. But Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, and Josh Downs against the Chiefs. The Kansas City defense have allowed the 2nd fewest points per game against the wide receiver position this season. When you look at their last 4 games, only one wide receiver finished over 60 receiving yards. And in those 4 games, they've only given up 1 wide receiver touchdown. So you're already talking about a trio of wide receivers, which you never kind of really know who's going to go off. You kind of got to bet on the matchup. This matchup is tough. So only one of them might cross over 60 receiving yards. Only one of them might get a touchdown. So if you have other options to go over the Colts wide receivers this weekend, I would definitely consider that. And then my other sit, he'll be playing in tomorrow night's game against the Texans. Khalil Shakir against Houston. The Texans defense, they've allowed the 4th fewest points per game against the wide receiver position. When you look at their last 4 games, not one single wide receiver they've played has crossed over 50 receiving yards. And they've also only given up 3 wide receiver touchdowns. So they're arguably the best defense in the NFL right now. So I know Shakir could be a PPR machine, but I wouldn't want to start my week off with a very low floor performance from Shakir. So he's another wide receiver I would be looking to leave on my bench in week 12. And then to wrap this up, my top starts and sits at the tight end position. My top start of the week, which is going against a team that you want to stream tight ends against, Hunter Henry against the Bengals. The Bengals have allowed the most points per game against tight ends this season. When you look at the last 4 games that Cincinnati has played, 3 different tight ends have finished with at least 65 receiving yards. And in those 4 games, they've given up 7 tight end touchdowns. So I'm looking for Hunter Henry to get anywhere between 40 to 60 receiving yards and at least 1 touchdown on Sunday. Now, even though I don't love his quarterback, I still would consider streaming Cade Otton against the Rams. The Rams are tied for the 10th most points per game against the tight end position this season. When you look at their last 4 games, 2 different tight ends have finished with at least 70 receiving yards against their defense. And then why I like it is, as of late, they've been giving up tight end touchdowns. They've given up 3 tight end touchdowns over their last 4 games. So I think Otton, he should at least get you 40 receiving yards in this game and ideally a touchdown, but at least give you a floor performance in week 12. My sits of the week, this guy will be playing in tomorrow night's game. Another guy I would look to leave on my bench, but Dalton Schultz against the Bills. The Bills are tied for the fewest points per game against tight ends this season. When you look at Buffalo's last 4 games, only 1 tight end finished over 25 receiving yards, and that was Travis Kelce. That's kind of a given that he would at least cross that mark. And then when you look at the tight end touchdowns they've given up, I'm not talking about just the last 4 games. The Buffalo Bills have only allowed 1 tight end to score a touchdown for the entire season. So I'm looking at Schultz to have a very low floor performance, which is why I'd maybe look at streaming a Hunter Henry or a Cade Otton over him this weekend. And then my other sit, I'm going to go with Jake Ferguson against the Eagles. The Eagles are also tied for the fewest points per game tied for the fewest allowed points per game against the tight end position this season. When you look at actually Jake Ferguson's last 3 games that he's played against Philadelphia, in all 3 of those games, he has finished under 25 receiving yards. And then when you look at the Eagles defense for this season, in their last 4 games, only 1 tight end finished over 25 receiving yards against them. And they're just like the Bills. It's not their last 4 games. It's for the entire season. The Philadelphia Eagles have only allowed a tight end to score 1 touchdown against them to this point of the year. So yeah, given the fact that they've been very good against tight ends this year, and then Ferguson has finished under 25 receiving yards against the Eagles in his last 3 games against them, is why I would look for other options, like I said, like a Hunter Henry or a Cade Otton in week 12. So yeah, that wraps up this week's video for my top starts and sits. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure you do go hit that subscribe button. You can also follow me at Cody Talks NFL on my X account, Instagram, and TikTok. I'll talk to you guys next week. Wish you all the best of luck this weekend. Peace out.